You have come here tonight because something in you has begun to tremble not with fear, but with remembrance. There is a moment in every empath's life when the very power they spent years hiding begins to press against the walls of their psyche. Like a sun that can no longer pretend to be a candle. And it is in this moment, when the inner pressure becomes unbearable, that a strange realization dawns. You did not come to this world to stay small, nor to survive by dimming the essence that makes you who you are. You came to walk the bridge between the seen and the unseen, and the tension you feel now is simply the self insisting that it is time to awaken. What most people call sensitivity, you have lived as a double-edged sword. It is the gift that has allowed you to perceive what others ignore, the subtle wounding beneath someone's voice, the tremor in a mother's silence, the uneasiness behind a lover's smile. But it is also the weight that has forced you to carry realities that were never yours. Empaths often suppress their true power because the world teaches them that feeling deeply is dangerous, that knowing too much is threatening, and that seeing into others will cost them their belonging. And so you learn to fold your intuition, to silence your instincts, to bury the enormity of your inner life under obligations, roles, and expectations. But the psyche never forgets. What is repressed does not disappear. It waits. It waits in dreams, in synchronicities, in the persistent ache in the chest that no rational explanation can soothe. It waits in the moments when your outer life feels too small for the inner one, when every routine gesture feels like a betrayal of the truth you can no longer deny. It waits until your shadow, the guardian of everything you suppress, chooses to surface, not to punish you, but to retrieve you. When an empath represses their power, that power retreats into the unconscious and takes the shape of symbols, often symbols that appear in dreams as storms, serpents, flooded houses, burning forests, or forgotten children calling out from distant rooms. These symbols are not random. The unconscious does not speak in the language of reason. It speaks in the language of necessity. And it tells you, often long before you are willing to understand, that the time of hiding is coming to an end. Many of you have had dreams where you stand before a locked door. On the other side, you can hear a voice, familiar yet distant, calling your name. The door is heavy, ancient, and for years you have walked away from it because opening it meant confronting everything you were not ready to see. But tonight, I want to remind you of something essential. That voice behind the door has always been your own. It is the part of you that refused to abandon you, the part that remembers your original strength, your instinctive knowing, your capacity to transform the world. By transforming your inner landscape, the empath suppresses their power not out of weakness, but out of survival. When you grow up in an environment where others cannot meet your depth, you learn to protect them from your truth. When you sense pain in the house long before anyone names it, You learn to carry the emotional burden that the adults could not shoulder. When you feel the unspoken conflicts, the hidden resentments, the ancestral fractures passed down through silence, you instinctively become the mediator between worlds. In this way, you become more responsible for the emotional atmosphere than any child should ever be. This is why empaths often grow up with an inner division, a split between the self that sees everything and the persona that pretends not to. But the unconscious does not allow such a division to persist indefinitely. There comes a moment when the suppressed self begins to rise like a tide, and the persona, no matter how well constructed, begins to crack. You start having intense dreams. Old memories surface without warning. You may feel drawn to solitude, to symbolic images, to intuitive insights that seem to come from nowhere. These are not signs of instability. They are signs of emergence. What is emerging is the power. You buried the power to perceive the archetypal patterns behind human behavior, the power to sense the emotional truths beneath social masks, the power to see the shadow, not as an enemy but as a guide, in the power to navigate relationships not from fear but from clarity. This is the power that frightened you when you were younger. This is the power the world told you was too much. And yet, this is the power your destiny has always been waiting for. Every empath reaches a threshold where continuing to suppress themselves becomes more painful than revealing themselves. This threshold is what I call the moment of psychic ignition. The psyche refuses to remain fragmented. It demands integration. It demands that the empath finally recognize the truth that their sensitivity is not a weakness, but a form of perception, that their emotional intensity is not a burden, but a compass, that their attunement to subtle realities is not a curse, but a sign of spiritual maturity. But to activate the power you have suppressed, you must understand the terrain of your inner world. You must revisit the places where you abandoned yourself. You must reclaim the instincts you muted, the boundaries you dissolved, the anger you never allowed yourself to express. Anger, especially for empaths, is not what you think it is. It is not cruelty or loss of control. In its healthy form, it is the archetype of the protector demanding that you stop betraying yourself. Many of you fear your anger because you associate it with the destructive rage you witnessed in others. But your anger is different. It is not the anger of domination. It is the anger of truth. It is the energy that will allow you to say, this is enough. This is not my burden. This is not my role. This is not my identity. When the empath stops suppressing their anger, they stop suppressing their power. What you call power is not aggression, authority, or superiority. The empath's power is something far more ancient. It is the power of perception, the power of inner knowing, the power of stillness amidst the storms of others, the power to enter a space and sense the emotional atmosphere instantly, not because you are fragile, but because your intuition is calibrated to truths that others overlook. This capacity has always been your gift, but when you were younger, it felt like a liability because you had no one to teach you how to use it. Most empaths learn their power by absorbing the suffering around them. This is how they develop their intuitive muscles. You learned to read the room because you needed to survive it. You learned to sense danger, not from physical threat, but from emotional turbulence. You learned to trace the invisible threads of tension between people because no one explained them to you. You had to understand them instinctively. But what once protected you eventually imprisons you, and the very same sensitivity that allowed you to survive your childhood becomes the prison bars of your adulthood. You start anticipating others' needs before they speak, abandoning yourself in the process. You start feeling responsible for emotions that are not yours. You start absorbing the pain of others because you confuse compassion with self-sacrifice. Tonight, I tell you this, the era of self-sacrifice is ending. The empath is about to activate the power they spent a lifetime suppressing because the psyche no longer allows you to betray yourself for the comfort of others. And you can feel it, that trembling sensation in your chest, the intuitive pull toward your own truth, the subtle but persistent feeling that something in you is rising. You might not have the words for it yet, but your unconscious has already begun the work. It is rearranging you from the inside. It is burning away outdated identities. It is dissolving the roles you were conditioned to play. It is whispering to you in dreams that your destiny is no longer tied to the emotional wounds of others. Some of you have dreamt of fire recently. Fire in Jungian psychology is the symbol of transformation, but also of purification. When the empath dreams of fire, it means the unconscious is preparing them for a shift from internalizing others' emotions to interpreting them, from absorbing energies to transforming them, from carrying burdens to discerning which burdens were never yours. This shift can feel disorienting because it disrupts the old contract you had with your environment. You were once the emotional buffer, the healer, the mediator. People came to you not for who you were, but for what you could absorb. You were the psychic sponge that kept peace in systems built on silence. But when an empath begins to reclaim their power, these patterns begin to collapse. People may react. They may resist the new boundaries you set. They may accuse you of changing, but in reality, you are not changing. You are returning to yourself, returning to your intuition, returning to your truth, returning to the original inner authority you surrendered long ago. And this return is not loud. Empathic power does not awaken in explosions. It awakens in clarity. It awakens in the moment you stop apologizing for your depth. It awakens when you stop shrinking to accommodate the emotional immaturity of others. It awakens when you finally understand that your insight is not too much, it is precise. The world needs the empath's power now more than ever, not the suppressed version of it, not the timid version, not the people-pleasing version, but the awakened version, the version that sees the unconscious patterns shaping human behavior, the version that recognizes projection before it takes root, The version that refuses to carry ancestral burdens simply because no one else has the courage to face them. Your time of hiding is over. The self is calling you to step into your rightful place, not as a martyr, but as a guide. As this inner power rises, you may begin to feel a strange mixture of anticipation and fear. This is natural. Every individual who approaches their true psychic strength must confront the threshold guardians of the unconscious, the symbols, memories, and emotional residues that once taught you to stay small. The empath, more than any other archetype, forms a deep loyalty to the roles they were given, even roles that suffocate them, even roles that steal decades of their life. And so, when the self begins to call you back into alignment, the persona resists because it was built to protect you from a world that did not know how to meet the intensity of your perception. But the time has come when the persona can no longer serve as your shield. The structures you built to survive must now dissolve to make space for the structures that will allow you to evolve. You cannot carry both versions of yourself into the future. One must fall away, and you can feel this falling, the sense that certain relationships no longer fit, that certain environments drain you rather than nourish you, that the emotional atmospheres you once tolerated now feel intolerable. This is not because you have become weaker, but because you have become more conscious. Awareness has a way of making what was once familiar seem foreign. Many empaths begin awakening when they realize they are tired, not merely physically, but spiritually, psychologically, archetypally tired. This is the exhaustion of the soul after a lifetime of carrying the emotional weight of others. You might have believed this exhaustion was normal. You might have thought it was simply your fate. But fatigue is often the psyche's way of whispering, this is not your energy to hold anymore. When the empath reaches this point, repression can no longer sustain itself. The shadow begins to rise to reclaim everything you abandoned in order to maintain peace. This rising is not always gentle. Sometimes it comes in waves of unexpected emotions, anger, grief, clarity, intuition that feels almost intrusive in its accuracy. Sometimes you see truths you never wanted to admit. You recognize the manipulations you once excused. You notice patterns that once controlled you. You begin to see the emotional contracts that were silently written without your consent. And as painful as this illumination can be, it is the beginning of liberation. When I worked with patients who were empaths long before the term existed, I observed a recurring phenomenon. Those who suppressed their power would often dream of animals trapped behind glass, wolves pacing in small rooms, birds beating their wings against invisible barriers, serpents coiled beneath floorboards waiting to rise. These images are not random. They are expressions of instinct. Instinct is the raw, unfiltered intelligence of the psyche. And when it is caged, it becomes restless. The empath's instinct is their power source. It is the part of you that knows when someone's words contradict their energy. It is the part that warns you when a relationship is no longer aligned. It is the part that pushes you to move even when your rational mind demands you stay. To activate your suppressed power, you must free your instinct from the glass room. You must acknowledge that your intuition has been speaking the truth all along. The people who told you that you were overreacting, too sensitive, or imagining things were often those who benefited from your misalignment, and so you learned to doubt the very perception that was designed to protect you. Now, as your awakening accelerates, the instinct returns with a force that can no longer be ignored. This return often creates internal conflict. The old self wants to maintain harmony at any cost. The emerging self wants truth. And between these two selves, a tension begins to build. This tension is not a sign of failure. It is the crucible of transformation. Human beings do not awaken through comfort. They awaken through contradiction. The empath begins to feel the full weight of who they used to be pressing against, who they are becoming. During the stage, many report feeling as though two versions of themselves coexist, one exhausted, one rising, one fearful, one curious, one attached to the past, one leaning towards the future. This duality is not fragmentation, it is integration in progress. The ego is loosening its grip, allowing the self to move forward. The world, however, will not always understand this. People may sense that something in you has shifted. They may notice your silence becoming deeper, not because you are withdrawing, but because you are listening more closely to the voice within. They may notice that you no longer comply with their emotional demands. They may notice that you have stopped explaining yourself, apologizing for yourself, or contorting yourself into shapes that make others comfortable. What they are witnessing is a return of your center. The empath's true power begins to activate the moment they stop orbiting around the needs of others. For decades, you may have lived as a mirror reflecting the emotions, wounds, aspirations, and illusions of those around you. But a mirror cannot become a mirror forever. Eventually, it must remember that it is also a window, and through this window, the unconscious begins to show you the truth of your own nature. Some empaths experience a sudden surge of claircognizance, the sense of simply knowing without knowing how. Others experience heightened dreams, where ancestral figures appear, offering guidance or pointing toward unresolved wounds in the bloodline. Others begin sensing shifts in relationships, days or even weeks before they occur. These shifts are not hallucinations. They are the natural expansion of the empath's psychic field when repression dissolves. Repression compresse perception. Awakening expands it. As your perception expands, you begin to notice the archetypal forces that shaped your life. The wounded child who learned to soothe others before soothing themselves. The healer who believed they must bleed to be useful. The mediator who kept peace by sacrificing their own emotional truth. The orphan archetype who believed they must earn love through self-abandonment. The sage within you who remained silent because the world preferred your compliance over your clarity. You may even begin to recognize the presence of the shadowed magician archetype, your ability to see behind the scenes of human behavior, to sense motivations that others disguise, to understand dynamics that have no words, but until now, this magician remained silent because you feared what would happen if you revealed what you knew. Fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being rejected, fear of being right. But the true empath does not fear their insight. What they actually fear is the responsibility that comes with it. Because once you see the truth, you can no longer pretend. Once you understand the pattern, you can no longer unconsciously participate in it. And once you recognize your own power, you can no longer live a life that requires you to suppress it. This realization often comes with a significant emotional release. Some cry without understanding why. Some feel waves of anger rising through their body. Some feel a strange calmness, as though something ancient has finally ended. This is the dissolution of the emotional contracts you never consciously agreed to. The contract to be the strong one, the contract to carry the pain of others, the contract to keep peace at the expense of your boundaries, the contract to be the emotional anchor for those who refuse to anchor themselves. The moment these contracts begin to break, the empath's energy changes. You may feel lighter, clearer, and sharper. Your mind becomes less cluttered with the emotions of others. You stop absorbing by default and begin discerning by instinct. Discernment is the empath's first true power. It is the ability to distinguish between what is yours and what is not. And once you master discernment, you reclaim the emotional space that was always meant for your own growth. At this stage, dreams become powerful guides. You may dream of water rivers, oceans, floods. Water represents emotion. If it is overflowing, it means the unconscious is releasing long-held emotional residues. If it is calm, it means your psyche is beginning to regulate itself. Some dream of flight, symbolizing liberation from roles that once bound you. Some dream of doors opening on their own, or pathways previously hidden now becoming visible. These are not just dreams, they are messages. The unconscious is showing you that the path ahead is open. When an empath stops suppressing their power, the world around them reacts. Some people may feel threatened because your clarity exposes their unconscious intentions. Some may distance themselves because your energy no longer feeds them. Others may become drawn to you, sensing a new strength, a groundedness that was previously hidden beneath layers of self-abandonment. But the most important shift happens within you. You begin to understand that your sensitivity has always been intertwined with strength. Sensitivity is not softness, it is accuracy. It is the ability to perceive the psychic landscape of others with precision. It is the capacity to detect truth. Even when words deceive, it is the intuition that guides you toward alignment and away from danger. You were never meant to suppress this. You were meant to master it. And mastery begins with sovereignty, the recognition that your energy belongs to you. For years, you have allowed others to draw from your emotional reserves as though you were an endless well. But the well was never endless. It was simply deep, and now the self is calling you back to replenish it. Tonight, as we continue this journey, I want you to remember this. The power rising within you is not new. It is ancient. It is the wisdom of every empath who came before you, every ancestor who felt more than they could express, every lineage that carried emotional truths in silence. You are not just activating your power, you are reclaiming an inheritance. The question now is not whether you are ready. Your soul has already decided that. The question is whether you are willing to stop apologizing for your intuition, willing to trust the truths your body has whispered for decades, willing to release identities that no longer reflect your inner reality, willing to meet the shadow, not with fear, but with respect, willing to become the version of yourself that your destiny requires. The empath who activates their power becomes a force of clarity in a world built on confusion. And clarity, when embodied, becomes liberation. As the empath approaches the deeper stages of awakening, a subtle yet powerful shift occurs within the psyche. You begin to sense that what is rising inside you is not merely emotion, nor intuition, nor memory. It is identity. Not the identity shaped by childhood, society, or the personas you were forced to adopt, but the identity formed by the self, the core essence that existed before conditioning, before wounds, before expectations. The self begins to reorganize your inner world, pulling back all the fragments that scattered across years of self-denial, returning them to their rightful center. And as these fragments reunite, you feel more whole, but also more exposed. For the first time, you begin to see yourself without distortion. You see the strength you once minimized. You see the clarity you once doubted. You see the wisdom that was always there, waiting beneath layers of inherited fear. And this seeing is not gentle, it is piercing, because the moment you see who you truly are, you can also see the version of yourself you pretended to be. You see how much of your life was shaped by roles that did not belong to you. You see how often you allowed others to define your worth, your identity, your boundaries. You see the places where you betrayed your own intuition in order to maintain emotional safety. But this is not a tragedy. This seeing is a resurrection. Empaths often awaken not through joy, but through disillusionment. When the illusions collapse, the truth emerges not as an idea, but as a force. You begin to understand the purpose of every wound, every relationship, every emotional pattern. You begin to see why you were drawn to certain people, why you tolerated certain dynamics, why you carried burdens that were never yours. And as these realizations crystallize, the power you once suppressed begins to flow through you like an underground river, finally breaking through the surface. Some of you may have felt recently that your intuition has sharpened beyond anything you have experienced before. You sense the truth of a situation before words are spoken. You feel shifts in emotional atmospheres before actions are taken. You may even notice a strange synchronicity, people revealing their unconscious motives without meaning to, their energy becoming more transparent, their behavior aligning with the intuitions you had long ago. This is not coincidence. It is the return of your psychic authority you have always seen beneath the surface. The difference now is that you no longer deny what you see. This clarity, however, comes with responsibility. When an empath activates their suppressed power, they must confront the patterns that once controlled them so deeply they believed those patterns were part of their identity. Many of these patterns originate in childhood, particularly in the relationship with caregivers whose emotional instability shaped your sensitivity. Some of you learn to sense the slightest shift in mood from a parent because your safety depended on it. Some of you learned to carry emotional burdens because no one else could. Some of you learned to read silence, tension, and unspoken anger because words were unreliable. These early experiences sharpened your attunement but also distorted your relationship with your own needs. You learned to orient your energy outward rather than inward. You learned to scan the emotional landscape of others before checking the landscape within yourself. And eventually, your inner world became a ghost town, a place you visited only when there was no external crisis to manage. Now, as your power activates, the unconscious demands that you return home, the home within the self. This homecoming often triggers latent emotions. Old grief rises from the depths. Old anger, once swallowed, now demands expression. Old boundaries, once neglected, now insist on being rebuilt. You may feel waves of emotions that seem disproportionate to your current life. But these emotions do not belong to the present, they belong to the past. Attempting to complete their cycle in Jungian psychology, this process is known as retrogressive restoration of the persona. The old protective identity must dissolve so that the true one can emerge, and as it dissolves, the emotions it once repressed come up to be integrated. This is why awakening can feel overwhelming at times. You are not falling apart. You are finally allowing yourself to feel everything you once denied in order to survive. During this phase, dreams become more vivid, more symbolic, more insistent. You may dream of descending into caves or underground tunnels representing your journey into the unconscious. You may dream of encountering animals. You fear symbols of instincts you have suppressed. You may dream of losing your way in forests, representing your transition from the familiar landscape of old roles to the uncharted terrain of your true identity. And sometimes you may dream of light small at first, then growing, illuminating rooms that were once dark. This light is the self revealing what was forgotten. Many empaths report dreams of houses with hidden rooms. They open a door and discover a space they never knew existed. A room filled with books or artifacts or symbols of forgotten memories. These rooms represent parts of the psyche that were neglected but not lost. The awakening process is not about becoming something new. It is about remembering what was always there. As you remember, something extraordinary begins to happen. The emotional burdens you once carried for others start to fall away. You begin to see the difference between compassion and self-sacrifice. You begin to understand that helping others does not require losing yourself. You begin to realize that your energy is precious and that not everyone deserves access to it. You may find yourself withdrawing from relationships that were once central to your life. You may feel an instinctive need for solitude, not to escape, but to recalibrate. Solitude becomes your sanctuary, your laboratory, your temple. In this solitude, the empath's power begins to ripen. You start to sense the archetypes that influence your life. You may feel the presence of the wounded healer within you, the part that learned to mend others before mending yourself. You may feel the rise of the sage, the inner voice that speaks with clarity you once ignored. You may sense the reawakening of the warrior archetype, not the warrior who fights battles outside, but the warrior who fights for your inner integrity. There is also the shadowed lover, the part of you that longed for intimacy but settled for emotional crumbs. This archetype will now ask you to reevaluate what you accept in relationships. You may feel a sudden intolerance for manipulation, for vague intentions, for emotional ambiguity. You begin to demand depth, honesty, reciprocity. And this is not because you have become rigid. It is because yourself refuses to participate in dynamics that starve your soul. At this point, your energy begins to change in a way that others can sense. Some will feel drawn to you because your presence now carries coherence. Your boundaries are clear, your intuition sharp, your energy stable. Others will feel unsettled because they can no longer extract from you what they once did. They may sense that the old version of you, the version who accommodated, absorbed and softened, everything no longer exists, and they will be right. What they are witnessing is the emergence of a new magnetic field around you. Your aura becomes more defined, your intuition becomes more directive, your inner world becomes more organized, and with this organization comes authority, not external authority, based on dominance, but inner authority, based on alignment. You begin to speak less, but your words carry more weight. You begin to listen differently, not to react, but to understand. You begin to sense the difference between your emotions and others' emotions with unprecedented clarity. You begin to respond instead of absorb, and perhaps for the first time in your life, you begin to feel the ground beneath your own feet, not the emotional ground of your environment, but the inner ground of yourself. This grounding marks the turning point. Until now, the empaths lived like a tuning fork resonating with the world around them. Now, you become the one who sets the frequency. This is the empath's true power, the ability not just to read emotional energy, but to influence it by embodying truth. Truth is the empath's sword. Presence is the empath's shield. Intuition is the empath's compass. And self-awareness is the empath's liberation. When these four forces align, Nothing you once feared can control you again. You no longer fear disapproval, because you no longer seek validation from the unconscious projections of others. You no longer fear abandonment, because you have returned to yourself. You no longer fear conflict, because you see through the illusions that create it. You no longer fear your own emotions, because you have learned to interpret them rather than drown in them. This is what it means to activate the power you spent a lifetime suppressing. You are not becoming someone new. You are remembering who you were before the world taught you to forget. The empath who reaches this stage enters a new psychic landscape, one defined not by survival, but by sovereignty. And from this sovereignty, your destiny begins to rewrite itself. When the empath enters this final threshold of awakening, the nature of their inner world changes in a way that is nearly impossible to articulate to those who have not walked the same path. What was once fragmented becomes coherent. What was once overwhelming becomes navigable. What was once repressed begins to speak with a clarity that feels ancient, as if it had been waiting for centuries for this very moment. This stage is not defined by dramatic transformation, but by a subtle, persistent shift, a gravitational pull inward toward a center that feels both newly discovered and deeply familiar. You may notice that your emotional landscape becomes quieter, not numb, but spacious. The noise that once filled your inner world, the noise of other people's expectations, projections, wounds, demands begins to fade. In its place emerges a silence that is alive, vibrant, and filled with meaning. This silence is not emptiness, it is the self speaking in its purest form. In this silence, you begin to sense your true power, not as force, not as authority, not as dominance, but as presence. Presence is the empath's most awakened expression. It is the state in which you no longer absorb, no longer mirror, no longer contort yourself into the emotional needs of others. Instead, you stand as a clear mirror reflecting truth without losing yourself in the reflection. This is the moment when others begin to respond differently to you. Some may feel calm in your presence, as though your steadiness anchors their scattered emotions. Others may feel exposed because your clarity reveals the unconscious motivations they have been avoiding, and some may distance themselves, not because you have changed, but because you have stopped playing the role their unconscious assigned to you. You are no longer the emotional container, you are the observer, you are the interpreter, you are the one who understands the symbolic undercurrents that shape human behavior, and with this shift comes a new kind of responsibility. The responsibility to use your power consciously, not reflexively. For many empaths, the greatest fear is the fear of their own intuition. Intuition sees too much, too deeply, too quickly. It reveals what others would prefer to keep hidden. And so for years, perhaps decades, you learned to dim your inner vision, to question your instincts, to silence the quiet. knowing that whispered through your bones, but now you can no longer hide from it. The knowing rises with such force that denying it becomes impossible. It is not a voice you hear, it is a truth you feel. This truth often arrives in symbolic ways. You may feel a sudden aversion to people who drain your energy, even if you cannot explain why. You may sense that certain relationships are nearing their natural end. You may be pulled intuitively toward new paths, new environments, new identities, without any logical justification. But intuition does not operate according to logic. It operates according to alignment. In Jungian terms, intuition is the language of the self. And once the self awakens, intuition becomes your guide, your compass, your primary means of navigating reality. You begin to see the symbolic meaning of events. You notice synchronicities that seem too precise to be accidents. You encounter messages through dreams, patterns, chance encounters that point you toward the next stage of your destiny. This is not magical thinking, it is psychological alignment. When the unconscious and the conscious mind move in harmony, reality begins to organize itself around purpose. Some of you may begin to recall memories from childhood with new understanding. Memories you once interpreted as weakness now reveal themselves as training. Times when you felt alone become evidence of your early sensitivity. Times when you carried emotional burdens become proof of your resilience. Times when you were misunderstood become signs of a depth others could not yet comprehend. It is in this re-evaluation of your past that you begin to heal not only your own wounds, but the wounds of your lineage. Because the empath's awakening is not merely personal, it is ancestral. You are the one chosen, or perhaps the one capable to end patterns that have persisted for generations. The emotional suppression, the silence, the unspoken pain, the unresolved trauma that flowed through your family line begins to dissolve as you awaken. You are not breaking the cycle through effort. You are breaking it through consciousness. In your dreams, you may see ancestors calling to you, guiding you, watching you with a mixture of sorrow and pride. You may dream of old houses collapsing, representing the old structures of your lineage, falling away. You may dream of rivers clearing after storms, symbolizing emotional purification. These dreams are not illusions. They are symbolic initiations. The unconscious recognizes your awakening and responds by revealing knowledge previously inaccessible. As you step deeper into your power, another shift unfolds. Your boundaries become instinctive. You no longer debate whether you should distance yourself from someone who drains you. Your body decides before your mind can question. You no longer feel guilt for protecting your energy. The guilt dissolves because you understand that self-sacrifice was never noble, it was conditioning. Boundaries stop being acts of defense and become acts of clarity. This clarity transforms your relationships. You begin attracting people who speak your emotional language, who honor your depth rather than exploit it, who see your empathy as strength rather than utility. These connections feel different. They feel reciprocal, alive, grounded. And as these new relationships enter your life, you begin to understand what true connection actually means. For the first time, you feel seen not for your ability to carry pain, but for your essence. For the first time, you feel valued not for what you provide, but for who you are. For the first time, you feel safe, not because you are shrinking, but because you are standing fully in your truth. This is the empath's rebirth. In this rebirth, you begin to access a deeper layer of your psyche, the archetype of the integrated healer. This archetype is not the wounded healer who sacrifices themselves for others, nor the martyr who loses their identity in service. The integrated healer is the one who understands that healing does not come from absorbing pain, but from revealing truth. Your presence becomes a mirror that shows people what they are unwilling to see. Your clarity becomes a catalyst for transformation. Your intuition becomes a light in the darkness, but this light is not outward facing. It radiates from within, and it is this inner radiance that marks the completion of your awakening, because for the first time in your life, you are no longer defined by the wounds you inherited, the roles you adopted, or the patterns you repeated. You are defined by yourself, and this self is vast. It is the part of you that has known since childhood that you were different, not fragile, not overwhelmed, but tuned to frequencies others could not hear. It is the part of you that felt emotions not as burdens but as information. It is the part of you that intuitively knew when others were lying or hurting or pretending. It is the part of you that saw the archetypes behind people's faces, the mother, the child, the warrior, the shadow. It is the part of you that recognized truth long before you had the language to articulate it. You did not suppress your power because it was weak. You suppressed it because it was immense, because the world was not yet ready, because you were still learning how to carry it without collapsing, because you needed time to grow into the weight of your own intuition. But that time has ended. Now you stand at the threshold, not as the child who absorbed everything, but as the adult who understands, not as the empath who sacrifices themselves, but as the empath who sees not as the carrier of others' burdens, but as the interpreter of their patterns, not as the one who bends, but as the one who stands. And this standing is your true activation. This standing is your return. This standing is your destiny unfolding from the inside out. What rises in you now is not emotion, not fear, not memory. It is power, quiet power, rooted power, ancient power, the power that comes from knowing yourself, the power that comes from integrating the shadow rather than hiding from it, the power that comes from trusting your intuition rather than silencing it, the power that comes from honoring your boundaries rather than dissolving them. This is the empath transformed, not softer, not harder, clearer, not overwhelmed, not detached, aligned, not lost, not searching, awakened. You have spent a lifetime suppressing this power, but now It moves through you freely, unbounded, undiluted, unapologetic. You are stepping into the vastness of your own psyche, and nothing that once held you small can contain you anymore. This is the beginning of the empath's true life, the life lived from the self, the life guided by intuition, the life anchored in presence, the life defined by clarity, the life you were always meant to live.